Morning.
Morning.
So we're at a couple of minutes past the hour, so we'll kick off, and there may still be a few people that will join us. But morning, everyone. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Sophie. I'm head of community at BGF, and running the Scale program that this session is part of. I would just encourage you to turn your cameras on if you're able to. I think we
Do me
always
a
really
favour.
like to try
Can
and
you
make
go to your
these.
Tanya? I forgot I've got a meeting. I'll be out
Oh,
about half an hour.
and if we could just be on mute. That would be that would be great.
Sorry.
That's all right. Don't worry. No worries at all. Um, yeah, and yeah, if you can turn your cameras on, fantastic. And we've got an hour. We've got the team from NFP here, so let's make the most of the session and ask questions and interact and jump in. If you want to write them in the chat or if you want to raise your hand, then we will get round to them. But I will now hand over to Ian, who's going to kick off the session.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. Really excited to be here. Uh, have the opportunity to talk to you about uh, the changing employee benefits marketplace. Uh, the team here are going to be talking about both ways in which we can find greater value, control cost, but also a little about how employee benefits can play a wider role for you in supporting recruitment and supporting those wider company growth objectives. My name's Ian Chadwick. I'm Managing Director of the NFP Employee Benefits Division. NFP is a part of the Aon Group, and we tend to specialise in mid-market clients. So, in that employee benefits space, looking to support organisations like yourselves. I'm joined today by Gerdip, who's one of our senior employee benefit consultants, and he'll be taking you through a lot of today's presentation, and also by Martin Parish, who's head of our retirement business, and he's going to be talking a little about what's happening in the workplace pensions area, but also having a focus in on, I think, what's a really important area, which is salary sacrifice, where there's been a huge amount of publicity after the last budget, and perhaps correcting a few myths and talking about the role that retirement and salary sacrifice still has to play. So I will hand over now to Gerdip, who will take you through the first part of our presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Ian. Good morning, everybody. So let's start with the wider landscape. The UK benefits market is going through one of the most active periods we've seen in years. Medical inflation is rising, demand for treatment is increasing, and employees are expecting more support from their employers. Alongside that, the insurers are now developing their propositions to add more value because the core insurances that they used to offer just aren't enough anymore in today's competitive marketplace. So, what this means is simple. Benefits are no longer a nice to have, they're a strategic tool. And this is where we come in, helping organizations navigate these pressures, control costs, and still deliver benefits that generally matter to employees. So, we've chosen four subjects to focus in on today. Maximizing cost savings whilst providing tangible value for employees, private medical insurance, pensions, and how employee benefits can enhance your employee value proposition, EVP. So, why are these subjects important? These topics matter because benefits are becoming more expensive and more complex. Costs and claims are rising. Um, and many organizations are unknowingly paying for duplicated services. Our role is to help organizations cut through that complexity. So we review benefits, identify inefficiencies, and make sure every pound spent is adding value, both for the business and their people. I think one uh, key statistic that came out of a CIPD survey was 78% of employees say benefits are a key part of the decision to stay with an employer. That's quite a powerful statistic, and it just underlines the value of the topics that we're covering today. Let's have a look at maximizing cost savings while providing tangible benefits.
Oh, just one moment, Gurdeep. I'll just Jenny, I think you're not on mute. So we've got some background noise. If you're able to mute, thank you.
Um, so maximizing cost savings whilst providing tangible benefits. So when we talk about cost savings, we're not talking about cutting benefits. We're talking about designing them intelligently. We look at whether your benefits are still fit for purpose, whether you're paying for services you already get for free, and whether your premiums are aligned with the market. This is where our expertise really make a difference. We know the market, we know the providers, and we know how to negotiate on our clients' behalf. So we want to look at a practical example of how this would work. And I'm going to ask Martin to come in and talk about the pensions first of all in this example.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Gurdip, and good morning, everyone. So in this situation, the client was using Nest, which in our opinion is a bit of a tick box exercise. They were looking to put something of a bit more value in place. They were paying good levels of contributions. They actually hadn't realized that with Nest, there are two levels of charges that apply. There's an annual management charge of zero point 0.3, but there's also a contribution charge of 1.8. So from our perspective, that's quite expensive in the workplace pensions market. They weren't also using salary sacrifice. So in essence, we've changed the provider, managed to secure lower charges, and we've implemented salary sacrifice. Those NI savings are being retained by the firm, but of course, employees also save personal NI. It's also more efficient from an administration purpose. So all round, they didn't need to change contributions or anything else, or their qualifying period, or anything to do with their automatic enrolment compliance. It was just structurally changing the provider to deliver better value for the business and their people. Back to you, Gurnett.
Thank you, Martin. Pensions is always a good place to start because it's the one benefit that's mandated by law that you need to provide. So the interaction between employees and pensions is important. Um, so the next step really to look at in this example is actually understand the benefits that are in place and what is their purpose and what services are embedded within them. So we know life assurance is a benefit if an employee was to pass away, a benefit will be paid to their beneficiaries. Group of income protection is a long-term sickness benefit, which provides a replacement income if an employee is too sick or injured to work. And an employee assistance program is designed for in the moment counselling, so short-term mental health reprieve. When we look at a benefits program like this, the next step is then to analyze where the efficiencies could be within this benefits program. So we know from the group life assurance and income protection market, an employee assistance program would already be embedded within that product. So why is an organization paying separately for an employee assistance program, and what benefit can that actually give? Well, the one benefit that an employee assistance program as a standalone can give is MI reporting. Now, how important is MI reporting within an EAP? Well, the average utilization of an EAP is between 4 to 10%. So they're not highly utilized benefits. So how much can the MI really teach you about your organization? The average cost of an EAP is about £4 per employee per month. But many employers are paying for them twice without realizing it, because many insurers now include the likes of virtual GPs, counselling, and wellbeing apps as standard. And we often identify opportunities to remove duplicate spend while improving support. So once we've identified the efficiencies, we can then review the benefit design to see whether there are opportunities for cost efficiencies or areas for improvement. So in this specific example, 2 times annual basic salary. If we are going to remove the spend of the employee assistance program because it's already embedded with two benefits that are being paid for, can that cost saving go to increasing what is viewed as a low level cost benefit to the market level? So the market level in group life insurance across all sectors in the UK is 4 times salary. So can that cost saving from removing the employee assistance program provide that? With the income protection policy, with this specific client, conversation was had with them because their deferred period is 26 weeks, which basically means that an employee needs to be absent for a period of 26 weeks before the insurance kicks in. And once that insurance kicks in, the claim is payable up until state pension age. So we had an honest conversation with this client, and we said, if an employee was to be long-term sick, how long would you realistically keep an employee on the books? Would you look to fund them all the way up until state pension age? And the honest answer from the client was they would actually look at a period of 5 years to be more realistic. So when we looked at what the cost saving was of aligning the payment period to what the actual business's outcomes were, it actually drove a saving of 35% in premium. So that's a significant saving. And that saving can then be reinvested into other areas of the benefits. And that could be, we've just identified employee assistance program costs can be saved. We've identified reducing the payment period can save up to 35% of premium. And then the employer national insurance savings from the pension scheme. When you look at all those savings in its entirety, there is then scope to make some tangible changes to the benefits program. Private medical insurance, big topic at the moment. Before we get into the details behind the rising costs, I think it's important that we all realign on what private medical insurance is actually for. So it doesn't replace the NHS, contrary to popular belief. The NHS still has a part to play within private medical insurance. But as we all know, the NHS have long waiting lists at the moment. So private medical insurance provides the opportunity to avoid the long waiting lists and get access to treatment sooner. It gives more choice over the healthcare journey of an employee. So they can choose who they want to go and see. They can choose the setting that they would like to go, as long as the policy allows. And what private medical insurance typically covers is acute conditions. So if you need to go and see a specialist and have a consultation, diagnostic testing, if there's the need for surgery and hospital treatment, cancer, mental health, musculoskeletal treatment, and virtual GP services are all included within private medical insurance. And I want to share with you an example of how private medical insurance works in practice. And it's my own personal example. So in 2017, I was having some diagnostic testing with my GP. My GP said, looking at the results, we need to refer you to a gastroenterologist. I had no idea what a gastroenterologist was and what they did. So I probably did the worst thing that you can do is go onto Google and try and figure out what it is that they can do. And one of the first things that comes up is they can diagnose cancer. So obviously, sitting in a position now where I'm thinking, wow, what could be going wrong? The waiting list at that time in 2017 to see a gastroenterologist on the NHS was 13 weeks. But luckily for me, I had private medical insurance. So within 2 days of that GP appointment, I had my first specialist consultation where cancer was ruled out on day 2. The following week, we had diagnostic testing, and 2 weeks later, I had my diagnosis. So within 4 weeks, I went from seeing the specialist to getting my diagnosis, which ended up being a chronic condition. And private medical insurance kind of stops at that point. And then you can be treated on the NHS. But if you think about that journey, from me going onto Google and seeing what the potential symptoms I had were, if I was waiting 13 weeks for my initial appointment, you can imagine as an employee, would I have been fully present in that moment when I've got the worries of my health? However, with private medical insurance, I was able to get my diagnosis within 4 weeks and had a clear treatment path after that. It's also important to recognise what private medical insurance doesn't cover. So emergency care, anything accident and emergency related, that needs to go through the NHS, routine pregnancy and childbirth, pre-existing conditions unless you have medical history disregarded, long-term or chronic condition management and cosmetic procedures are not usually covered. So why do employers offer private medical insurance? We're going to look at this in a lot more detail in a moment, but the headlines are attraction and retaining talent. It's almost becoming a must-have benefit now. Reducing sickness absence through access to faster treatment, supporting employees' well-being and productivity. It demonstrates a commitment as an employer to health and well-being of your employees as well. And as I just mentioned, it's a benefit employees increasingly are expecting to be within their benefits program. Now, if you don't currently offer a healthcare policy, we wanted to give you some approximate costs for varying levels of cover. So when we've looked at a low level of healthcare cover, we've looked at a health cash plan, and we've given some costs based on headcounts, which you can obviously review on the slide. But we will look at a health cash plan in more detail a little bit later on. The medium and high levels of cover are different options available within private medical insurance. So it is possible to customize the level of cover you offer to suit your own budgeting requirements. And if you currently do not offer any form of healthcare, you are probably best positioned to create a policy that provides access to healthcare at a cost that works for you. And that's going to become more apparent as I start going through the slides. Now, as a benefit partner, we can talk through the different options available within private medical insurance and provide quotations based on your demographic to demonstrate costs before any decisions are made. And for those of you who do currently offer private medical insurance, the next few slides are going to demonstrate some of the conversations you've probably already been having or some of the increases that you're seeing in the market. So there's three key drivers behind the cost impact that we're seeing, and that's increase in private medical insurance participants, increase in claims, and the backlogged NHS. I won't go through the entire timeline, but even before COVID, the NHS England were struggling to meet elective waiting time standards. Once COVID began, the backlogs began to rapidly grow and routine care was paused. All the while this is all happening, medical inflation is creeping up year on year. And by the time we got to 2023, the waiting list peaked at 7.7 million people waiting for elective care. And then in 2024, medical inflation peaked at 15%. Now, the good news is we are starting to see a downward trend, but it's still significantly higher than where we were pre-COVID. We also need to understand consumer buying behavior. So on this graph that you can see, there's three lines. The bottom one is individual private medical insurance or consumer private medical insurance. And the second line is workplace private medical insurance. And what you can see is individual PMI sales actually slowed down between 2020 and 2023 before sharply increasing in 2024. And that upward trend continued into 2025. Workplace private medical insurance saw a steady increase from 2020 to 2022 before increasing sharply in 2023 and has continued to trend upwards since, and we expect it to continue to increase upwards. The increase in workplace PMI policies coincide with the peak in the waiting lists that we just had a look at. We also need to look at consumer claiming behavior as well to fully understand the reasoning behind the increases that we're seeing at the moment. So insured PMI admissions have been rising at a significant level since 2020. The Association of British Insurers reported that the total number of individuals who made a claim on their policies rose 10% between 2023 and 2024, again coinciding with the peak in the NHS waiting list. Claims paid values also went up by 13%. So more people were claiming and the amounts that were being claimed for were increasing. So what we want to do now is want to focus on some real life examples of the increases that some of our clients have faced. So we've got three examples, all of companies of different sizes, and I'll talk you through each one. So client A, small employer, had very reasonable increases below medical inflation up until this year. They've seen an increase of 89.87%, which is practically double the premium that they've been paying for previous years. Second client, less than 100 employees, had been seeing increases above medical inflation, but again, had a large increase this year of 38%. And client C, larger organization, really had their big increase in 2024, and those increases stabilized, but because of the level of their premium, 19 and 20% is a significant increase. So that's just a demonstration of these clients have had their policies in place for more than 10 years. So the challenges that they faced are very individual to their policies, and it's just a demonstration of the type of conversations we've been having around the increases, given everything that we've just discussed previously. How to mitigate the rising cost of PMI policies. Now, private medical insurance is becoming a core part of the employee value proposition for many employers, but it's also one of the fastest rising costs. So the NHS backlog, increased demand for private medical insurance, increasing claims, both complexity and volume, and medical inflation are all pushing premiums up. Our job is to help our clients manage that pressure through market reviews, benefit design changes, strong negotiation, and navigating insurance provider changes. And as you'll see in the case studies, the savings can be significant. So case study one, this employer has 60 employees, and what we effectively did was we were looking at an increase of 37.63%. So that was the proposed increase by AXA Health, who were this client's insurer at the time. So we went out to the market, and we got some competitive terms from Bupa and Vitality. But what really helped in our negotiations for this client was we knew the story behind the increases. They had a senior employee whose partner was going through cancer treatment and had been going through cancer treatment for a number of years. So the increases we were seeing coming through were around the 35-40% mark year on year. That individual left the organization, which means their partner was no longer claiming. So we knew AXA Health were trying to recover costs from past claims. We were able to share this insight with the rest of the market to get competitive terms. And as a result, we got AXA Health to actually reduce their premium by 20k. The decision was made to actually maximize the saving on offer and switch to Bupa. And that enabled a saving of £30,000. And we managed the transition from AXA Health to Bupa as well. It's not a case of we get the best price and then it's over to our client. We'll sit with our client on that journey to the new provider. And there was some complications which we were able to manage on behalf of the client. In this second case study, this is a slightly larger employer with 240 employees. And when you have a larger plan, the access to data is far richer. And what we were facing were Vitality effectively proposed an 18.2% increase. Now, switching providers was a difficult conversation to have for this client because of their internal procurement processes. But what we were able to do was analyze the plan performance through all the data that was available to us. And through our analysis, we deemed that an 18.2% increase was excessive based on the data that we had available to us. So we presented our case back to Vitality, and without having to go out to the market, without having to speak to any other insurers, we were able to get Vitality to reduce their premium by £43,000. So that just goes to show having a partner who understands how to analyze data can enable savings without having to conduct a market review. Third case study, this employer had 90 employees. They had also been facing around 40% year-on-year increases. So this was really the third year. Now, my contact at this organization was in the HR team and obviously has to go back and tell the finance director the news that we're looking at another potential 40% increase. So we went out to the market, negotiated the cost down by £7,000. But the client wanted to understand what other levers can be pulled to extract more of a saving. So we looked at some benefit design changes, reducing the outpatient limit to £1,500, increasing the excess from £100 to £200, and doing both at the same time, just to show the level of savings that we could achieve for the client. Now, when they actually went back and reported it, they actually stayed on the current level of benefit, but the options were there if the finance director wanted to make a change, make a saving. There were things that we could do. And then if they did choose to make that change, we could explain to the employees of what that change was and what the impact would be of those changes. So these case studies that I've just been through, these aren't theoretical numbers. They're real outcomes for clients who are facing steep increases. And they demonstrate the value of having a partner who challenges renewal terms rather than accepting them. Now, we mentioned the health cash plan at the beginning of the private medical insurance segment. And health cash plans are a great way to support everyday healthcare needs at a low cost. So if you're looking for an entry level pathway into healthcare, health cash plans are very good and popular benefit. We are now seeing the introduction of health cash plans alongside private medical insurance as well. And the reason being is when a health cash plan is marketed correctly, they can actually help reduce PMI claims, which can support long-term cost control. And the reason for that is, as you can see from the table, the health cash plan covers many different benefits. But these benefits within a health cash plan are proactive. So if an employee is having issues with their back, they do not need to be referred to see a physio. They can go and choose to go and see a qualified physiotherapist. And they can do that proactively. Whereas on private medical insurance, it's a referred service. They need to be referred into that pathway. So they work in very different ways and can work in conjunction with each other as well. And we've helped clients integrate these plans into a wider wellbeing strategy, so they complement rather than duplicate other benefits as well. Martin, pensions, over to you.
Thanks very much, Gurdip. If we can move on a slide, that'd be great. So one of the challenges that we have in the UK, and I'm sure you'll have heard this, is most people believe pensions are complicated, too sophisticated. They don't start looking at their pension until their early 60s, just a few years from retirement, and then typically they're underwhelmed or surprised at how little they have or how little income they've got. From our perspective, pensions are quite straightforward. It's all about how much you can have in your pot by the time you reach retirement or by the time you decide to finish working. And essentially, there are only 4 factors that will influence how big a pension fund you have at retirement. All of these factors are controlled by yourself as an employer, but there are also aspects that can be controlled by the employee as well. So it'll come as no surprise that contributions are a significant factor. The more that goes into a pension plan, the greater the value will be at retirement. Auto enrolment has resolved some of that aspect because there's minimum contributions of 3-5%. However, that is unlikely to give people an adequate retirement income. It probably just keep them off the breadline. Contributions need to be around 14 to 20% of someone's pay for 40 years if you're going to build up a substantial enough pension fund to give you an income that you're likely to desire. Investment return is also critical. You will have seen, if you follow pensions in the FT and other press, that default funds are in a hot topic at the moment. The government is wanting to mandate where some of these pension funds invest. There's also going to be a move to investing in private markets to support UK PLC. That's upping the risk, but hopefully it might improve investment returns. But ultimately, the default fund that you use for your workplace pension scheme will be critical for most of your employees in terms of how well it's performing. And there are huge differences in how default funds perform. Costs are probably not as important as you may think. Personally, I think the FCA and the legislators and the government have focused too much on charges. Obviously, lower charges will help the fund grow, but they're not the key factor. And then fourthly, time. I always use the phrase, it's time, not timing. I think you'll see it, with the market volatility that we're experiencing at the moment, that trying to time when you invest is going to be exceptionally difficult. But we do know that if you stay invested over the long term in a predominantly equity-backed approach, you are likely to achieve above average or average returns. For us, when we deliver this presentation and this slide to employees, suddenly it's a bit of a light bulb moment. They suddenly realize that actually pensions aren't as complicated and as frightening as people first thought. These are all factors that, as I mentioned, as employers, you set the contribution rate, you choose the default fund, you choose your plan with the charges. I've alluded to Nest earlier, and you're all operating automatic enrolment to comply. But your employees can also put more in. They can choose different investment options. Some of those options may have higher charges because they're more actively managed, and so forth. So it's very much a joint exercise, but ultimately it's all about how big can you make your fund by the time you reach retirement. Moving on, Gurdip. Thank you. So from our perspective as an employer, you're facing a number of pressure points in the market. We know that employees want more from their employer around information, help, around decision making. We know the FCA is very concerned about decision making that people are making at retirement, subjecting themselves to perhaps prohibitive tax that would have been preventable. But all of that requires engagement throughout one's career, targeting people who are in certain scenarios, identifying life events. People going on maternity, for example, is a classic example. And often, by better engagement, you're actually getting people to value what you're putting in. If you're putting in over and above the automatic enrolment minimums, that's something to be proud of, if I'm being honest. I was speaking to a client the other day, and on their website, they didn't even list pension as a benefit, but they had their cycle to work and EV and all the rest of it. And I said, well, why don't you advertise pensions? And they said, well, we don't see it as a benefit because we just do the minimum, the government minimum. And I'm saying, well, that's still, you're putting in 3%. That's still free money for the employee. Surely that is a benefit. It's just interesting how different employers perceive these sort of regulations, duties, and benefits. Risk management, as I'm sure you will all agree, risk mitigation is the top of everyone's corporate agenda. So are you undertaking adequate reviews of your pension plan? Is it optimized in terms of its default fund design and its charges? What assessment have you done around people's decision making, etc., etc. Administration never goes away. Automatic enrolment has put a lot of pressure on employers to do more monthly or weekly around automatic enrolment, but there are improving systems, improving support. So are you optimizing what is in the market to free up HR or free up people time? That's always worth considering. And then finally, plan design. Is that optimized for the type of people you employ? We still see a lot of higher earners or higher taxpayers who are earning sort of over 60, 70, 80,000 plus, but they're in a pension scheme using qualifying earnings as the definition of pay. And yet these senior people or higher earners have got no comprehension that their pension contribution is on a limited amount, not on their total basic pay. So there are a number of key strategic decisions that employers need to understand and make ahead of, communicating and engaging with their employees. And finally, around plan design, interestingly, FCA came out last week and said they now know that most people are going to source their retirement income not just from a pension fund. It's likely to come from inheritance, from property downsizing, from other forms of savings like ISAs. We are starting to see the rise of platforms in the workplace. So tick box against automatic enrolment, but also allowing access to things like workplace ISAs so that people can save efficiently and tax efficiently. So those for us are 4 key pressure points that many employers face. If we can move on, please, Gurdeep. Now, salary sacrifice has been well documented. We still see far too many employers in the UK who are not leveraging it. The government announced last year that they were going to reduce the amount of employee contribution that would be eligible for salary sacrifice down to £2,000. I think there was a lot of scaremongering, and a lot of employers I speak to refer to it as being removed. But just to confirm, if you're doing relief at source at the moment, the employee contribution is going to the provider as a net contribution, i.e. after tax and NI. The provider is then adding tax relief to that. Your contribution is going into the pension fund. Higher rate or additional rate taxpayers then need to claim back that extra relief they're entitled to through self-assessment. That's another aspect, which is a bit of a burden, administrative burden, and let's face it, lots of people forget to do it as well. Salary sacrifice is simply a change in the mechanism for how contributions are made. There are hurdles that you need to jump over regarding contracts of employment and strategic decisions you need to make, but essentially the employee is swapping their pension contribution for a reduction in salary, and the employer is promising to put that into the pension as a gross contribution. The advantage of that, the employer saves 15% in national insurance, and the employee will save personal national insurance. They don't need to do self-assessment for pension contributions. It also means more money is being invested from day one to benefit from potential growth in that fund. So if there's any questions on that, we can cover those off at the end or reach out to us individually. Next slide, please, Gurdeep. This is just to give you an example of what the employer saving might be. This is based on someone using a definition of pensionable pay, which is basic pay. But you can see on a total payroll of £1 million, 5% going in from the employee, the employer's NI saving is £7,500 a year. We think also that many people will use the next 3 years as a planning opportunity to enhance contributions, to get money in before the reduction takes effect in April 2029. And those just extrapolate up on a pro rata basis. Next slide, please. So just to confirm, it's not the end of salary sacrifice. It will reduce. House of Lords have actually proposed a limit of £5,000. That's a recommendation to go back to the government. I think the amount that the government are looking to raise, about 4.7 billion, makes it unlikely that they'll go to that level. But we may well see a jump up from the 2,000. It enables you as businesses to review your pension scheme, and are you doing the right thing for you as a business and for your employees? Don't forget, if you do make any structural changes, which could mean a reduction in the employer contribution or an increase in the employee contribution, and you employ more than 50 people, there is a requirement to consult. And it doesn't have to be out of regular pay. We have lots of clients who do bonus waiver or bonus sacrifice, allowing people to sacrifice an element of their end of year bonus into the pension scheme as a lump sum. Extremely tax efficient and national insurance efficient as well. Next slide. Okay, so what would the impact be of the potential reduction? Interestingly, if you look at a business where the average pay is about 35,000 and they're using qualifying earnings, so that's roughly pay between 6.5 and 50,000, there would be no change to both the employer and employee national insurance saving figure. So, that scaremongering from last November, it's justified in part, but not wholly, in my opinion. There are still valuable savings to be had. Once you jump up an income level, and if you look at the £50,000 band and you're looking at basic pay as the definition of pay, still a 5% contribution, the annual cost impact for an employer will be about £75, for an employee £40. So a reduction, but not a removal in its entirety. Next slide, please. So that just concludes the pension session. I'll hand back to Gurdip.
Thanks, Martin. So the final topic we want to cover is how employee benefits can enhance your EVP, employee value proposition. So before we go into the detail of it, what does employee value proposition actually mean? So it's a combination of experiences, rewards, and benefits that an organization offers employees in return for their skills, time, and commitment. So effectively, what an employee feels as part of the organization, their experiences, and essentially, employee value proposition should answer the following questions. Why should talented people join us? And why should they stay? So I wanted to have a look at an example framework of an employee value proposition. And we chose the NHS for one specific reason. There's enough data out there publicly to formulate an employee value proposition framework. And I won't go into the details of it, but I wanted to give you the headlines of what an employee value proposition framework looks like. So for the NHS, they have a purpose. Their culture is important. Growth and development is important to the NHS. Reward, recognition, and well-being and work environment are the five core areas. And if you think about the NHS, and we all know the NHS, their purpose is to provide exceptional care for every person in the UK. Culture, they're a very multicultural employer, so an inclusive environment is an important aspect of their culture. Growth and development, one of the largest employers in the world, so they really do not need a huge turnover in staff. So they need clear pathways for clinical and non-clinical careers. Under reward, recognition, and well-being, generous NHS pension scheme is one of the headlines. And that's important to understand because they are looking for longevity of careers. So enticing employees with a generous NHS pension scheme is something that they use to keep employees. And if anyone follows pension legislation, you might remember a few years ago, tapered annual allowance changes that were brought in. But one of the reasons that the government gave for that was to entice retired doctors out of retirement to start practicing again to help the NHS with the situation that they were in. And obviously, the workplace environment is important to the NHS because of the nature of what they do. So, employee benefits and EVP. Your EVP is your story, why people join you and why they stay. Benefits are one of the most tangible expressions of that story. They show employees that you value their well-being, their financial security, and their long-term future. So we can help you align your benefits with your strategic goals so they support recruitment, retention, and culture. When we're looking at employee benefits and EVP, it's important to understand that every benefit that you offer tells a story. So protection benefits, if something was to happen to an employee, there is a benefit in place to support the family of the individual or financial security. Healthcare benefits, we've obviously spent a lot of time this morning talking about private medical insurance and the importance of that in terms of if something is not right with your employees' health, they can access faster healthcare. Well-being benefits, we talked about employee assistance programs, talked about gym benefits. Everyone's very health conscious these days, and having a gym benefit as part of your benefits program will help the overall well-being. And health assessments gives a picture of your health. And then your environmentally friendly salary sacrifice benefits, cycle to work scheme, and electric car schemes. These benefits can tell a story about your organization if communicated in the right way. So I wanted to finish on an example of how benefits can alter an employee value proposition. So one of my tech clients made a strategic decision to target new markets. They were targeting SME markets previously, and they wanted to switch their target client base to the corporate market. In order to do that, one of the key parts of their strategy was filling a number of senior positions. It's really important to understand if they did not fill those senior positions, the pivot in their strategy would fail. But they were struggling to fill those positions as the candidates that they were looking at were turning down the positions. And we've got a really good relationship with this client. We have a weekly call with them. So we're quite invested into their business and understanding their business. And we looked at the level of candidate that they were looking at, and then we looked back into their benefits program. And we identified that there were some improvements required within the pension and private medical insurance. So you just heard Martin allude to qualifying earnings. That's what they were using. Now, in the tech market in general, qualifying earnings isn't competitive. If you're looking for senior candidates, qualifying earnings, they've probably got a pretty good pension where they were. So to entice them away from that organization, we needed to look at their pension. Private medical insurance was excluding pre-existing conditions, but they were of the size that they could introduce medical history disregarded. They didn't have salary sacrifice in place, and they knew that they needed to make an investment into their benefits program. So what we looked at for them was implementing salary sacrifice to get the employer national insurance saving, which allowed them to look at the contribution structure and changing that contribution structure, as well as enhancing the private medical insurance cover. So as a result, the client was able to fill their senior positions, and they've increased their employee retention rates from 76% to 84% in year one. So this example shows how benefits can directly influence business outcomes. By improving their pension and PMI, they were able to fill those positions, but also those employees that they already had valued the changes that they made to their pension, which is probably something that this employer overlooked when thinking about their benefit strategy. So I'll finish with this. The benefits landscape is changing rapidly, and the organizations that thrive are the ones that adapt. Our role is to help you stay ahead by controlling costs, improving employee outcomes, and ensuring your benefits genuinely support your EVP. We bring market insight, negotiation strength, and a deep understanding of how to design benefits that work for your business and your people. So if you want to reduce costs, enhance your offering, and build a benefit strategy that truly differentiates you, we'd love to partner with you. So thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand over back to Ian.
Great. Thanks for that. Gerrit, Martin, hopefully everybody found that a really interesting 45 or 50 minutes. Uh, it's been great to meet you all during this session. I think there's a lot that's been highlighted there. I know Martin took us through some examples of salary sacrifice savings. I think that is still a super important way to get value. Most organizations have employees paying 5%. That is almost the default in the marketplace. So, based on a 5% employee contribution, the saving is almost exactly 0.75% of payroll, which how big that number is will depend on the size of your organization. But in relative terms, I think anything where, if there's two ways to do the same thing and one way saves 0.75% of your payroll costs, that should be something which is well up on everyone's agenda. Good. I think there is just a final slide, just to let you have some contact details. So, uh, if you need help calculating those savings, or you need some help in understanding how to implement this, we also have a service where you can effectively outsource implementing salary sacrifice to us. So, if the value is important, but business priority means it can never quite get the airtime, then I would often say in the 2 or 3 months it takes an organization to try and plan a project, sign it off, make sure the resource is adequate. Uh, it could have been outsourced and implemented, and the savings could be being enjoyed by the business. So we'd be really happy to take not just a salary sacrifice, but a wider diagnostics of both your retirement and your benefits program, so we can identify how many of the areas the team have talked about today are applicable to adding value to your organization, whether that's sort of saving money or whether it's just helping, as Gerd talked about at the end, making sure that what we do is purposeful, that the money that you spend on benefits does have the direct impact on EVP, on your employee relations, on retention and recruitment that you wanted to have. Uh, and that is it from NFP.
Great. Thanks, Ian. And thanks, Gedip, and the full team. That was a really, really interesting session. Just before we wrap up, I guess, does anyone have any last questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand or speak. Just speak. No? Well, that's just to say thank you again to NFP. We will also be putting the slides and the recording of the session on Scale, so you'll be able to review them there and also to share the recording with any colleagues that you might want to interact with the session as well. And if you have any questions, please just let us know, and we can obviously introduce you to the NFP team as well. Thank you everyone for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sophie.